Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 23 meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I'm going to ask Lyle to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a pretty full agenda. I think we can move through it briskly if folks stay pretty much to the comments in line with the priority which they're given. We first of all going to start out with a summary, basically where we are today with the Littleton Common Revitalization effort, which, as you know, is one of the 7 efforts, top priorities that this committee has elected on the basis of town recommendation to follow. Then we move on to feedback, preliminary assessment of the feedback that came from that meeting, from the residents as well as members who attended that meeting, and some interesting points that may have emerged from that feedback that is maybe new. A quick review of the zoning tasks, where we are now and what might remain, and then moving on to the next step, including a plan or a roadmap for what happens next as a result of what the town residents have helped us to select as the steps going forward. So to begin with, we're very fortunate to have one of the key members, the project manager for Fort Point, online with us tonight, and she can, as it were, move through where we are. Julie.
Okay, great. So first I just want to make sure everyone can hear me all right.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I know in the interest of time, I'll just go through things quickly. I'm providing visuals just to sort of give you a sense of some of the illustrative design that we've done. So Marin, I'm just going to ask you to move to slide 3.
Okay.
Okay, so the timeline, just to give everybody an understanding of where we are at in the project. We're essentially midway through. And I'll show you on the next slide the work that we have already accomplished and the work that is to be done, and then we'll move back to this timeline. So next slide, Marin. The initial tasks, we did a lot of bulk work, as you all are fully aware, in the initial part of the project. So I wanted to give you a clear understanding of all of the tasks that have been completed. The last 2 I will go over. You already received a presentation on the economic impact analysis, and I'll discuss a little bit more of the refined scenarios. However, you did see that at the open house, but I just want you to understand that those are 2 key pieces of information that we are building into the roadmap, the plan, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And the next coming step, the immediate tasks, are essentially to complete the zoning analysis, whether that's through the continuing on with the base zoning diagnostic and providing recommendations for change in that zoning code, in your zoning code, or doing it through a FormBased Code type of work, and then finalizing the redevelopment plan. And I'll give you a sense of schedule on that. So, Marin, next slide. For this portion, I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood what happened essentially with the revised scenarios. I know that this, again, is something we talked about at the open house, but for your purposes, I wanted to give you an understanding of how this is going to be used in the plan. And please, I guess, Marin, let me know if anyone has any questions. I won't be able to see that.
Sure.
Okay. So what we need to do with the work that was done by UTL essentially is the design schemes for how we want to provide you with a roadmap for redevelopment within the common. The diagram is just showing how basically we do that, and how we go through the particular types of what these say impacts, and not negative impacts, but impacts of, if you had increased housing, if you had additional open space, if you had, in transportation improvements, and those get built into the plan. The vision is what we've talked about is sort of this moderate density. This preferred, let's say, scenario is the redevelopment scheme that we're going on. And I want to make it clear that although we had shown that in the visualization and shown that in the open house, that's not at all what we are only proposing. So, we had to make a lot of assumptions, as we've discussed, about what percentage of retail, what percentage of office. It's all something that can be mixed and changed, but it's the base type of redevelopment that the town is interested in, and that's been confirmed now by both the initial feedback we received from the public workshop and now from the results of the discussion that we had at the open house. And I'll give you a summary of that. So I'll go to the next slide. Now, I wasn't sure how exactly to show you this. We've received a lot of varying comments, particularly from the last open house. But the team feels pretty strongly that the level of density and the level of redevelopment in a mixed-use theme is still on target with what the community is looking for. So although you're seeing here these specific comments on each of the boards that we showed, and again, if you recall, the boards not only showed the type of redevelopment density with the scenario, but it also showed what type of streetscape improvements need to be accomplished, in addition to what other open space acquisition or type of open space transfer into either green infrastructure or stormwater improvements or other recreational uses wouldn't need to happen to make this a full redevelopment plan and to have that density come to fruition. So you're seeing a lot of comments here about street improvements and green infrastructure, but if you notice, even comments that we received that were concerning are still in favor of the density of development. So this is only showing you a portion of like a 3-page summary that I believe Mari may have forwarded on. If not, we have that. And just to suffice it to say, we are still within, we are on target in terms of the level of redevelopment that's not only interest but also economically viable. So next slide, Maren. Just to give you a sense of where you start, this is where you started from. The existing conditions today have a lot of, let's say, a sparse use and segmented uses. So going, Maren, to the next slide, people are still, interested in the level of development that would occur if there was merely zoning changes. Obviously we've talked a lot about whether sewer goes in or sewer does not. So this is something that is sort of this interim potential. And then moving to the next, this is the revised, again, it's a scenario, but it's showing where we're headed in terms of the zoning changes and the regulatory changes that we will propose. So you've seen this. I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk about a couple of takeaways of our recent analysis of the public engagement piece. So I put a box up in the corner to give you a sense of that. So this particular takeaway, again, is that varied mixed uses, sorry about the typo, are going to be reliant upon housing and supporting commercial, and we've already discussed that pretty well at the open house. The next slide, again, the takeaway that we received with respect to the streetscape improvements is that they're essential. I think that there's a pretty overwhelming consensus that with the type of walkable community and sustainable community, whether from an environmental standpoint or an economic standpoint, you have to have some key street improvements to allow for green space, open space, transportation and traffic improvements, as well as stormwater improvements. So,
Okay, Anna has a question for you on this?
okay.
Hi, Julie. Actually, if we could go back to page 11 real quick. Your takeaway around moderate redevelopment scale is desired with varying mixed uses reliant upon housing and commercial and supporting commercial. Are you saying in that, Julie, that in order to support the commercial, the housing is needed?
Well, they go hand in hand, is what we're saying. I think really what the team feels pretty strongly about is that you can't have one without the other. I think we've determined through mainly the economic analysis that in order to bring some of these commercial uses to the common, aside from all sorts of other development incentives that we are intending on outlining in the plan, that what will push that economic base is, the support from folks who live within the common area or adjacent to the common area that are going to use those businesses.
Okay. All right. I asked that question because I just wanted to be very clear if there was any desire to have the commercial, but without the housing. What I hear you saying is that really just isn't possible.
I never like to close all doors, but it would be more difficult for the economic development side of things to really get pushed along.
Okay.
Let's say.
All right. Thank you.
One more question?
Yeah, and this is not, as far as I can tell, none of the drafts on the economic analysis side have touched on this point. And it's what I would call I'll just call it the inflection point. And that is, if, as you move through the process of what we'll call a close to full build-out between, or including commercial and housing, as you move along that, shall we say, that axis, at some point, X, there's going to be a minimum number of housing that acts as an attractant for commercial. And if you drop below that housing level, it is less likely the supporting commercial effort will, shall we say, come in. I understand that the notion here is that they work together, but very often that development is basically naturally or organically coordinated. So I was just wondering, do you feel, after reviewing the economic analysis provided by the Donahue Group, that there's enough detail in there so that the folks in town can have an understanding of where that inflection point is?
That's a good question, Mike. I think what I would say for now, after reviewing it, is yes, with a caveat, which is it's. So I think what's been helpful in the analysis is the point in time, right? So it's tricky because we're basing this on a build-out scenario, but there are going to be changes in population increases in certain cohorts at certain time frames that would indicate need for housing that then, sort of carry along a need for the commercial. So I'd say that that's a pretty solid correlation there, but what I can't speak to right now, and we can definitely talk this through again, is just, the type of uses that we've analyzed, it's out of scope a little bit for us to be able to say, okay, if there are additional, multifamily, young kids, will they have a specific need for, X type of, retail establishment? We're not at that. That's not something that we have included. That's far more of a retail-based market analysis. That's something we haven't done.
No, I wasn't asking you to do it. I just wanted to make sure that there was enough information in the report that we have available so far, the draft report that we have so far, that we could use it as a beginning point for the town itself to grapple with it as they engage with the private property owners, whether or not the ones that are present or others who may come in later and want to do transactions. So
I would say so.
Okay.
I think it paints a positive picture that, there's support here for economic development of the varying kinds that property owners hopefully will be interested in.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Sorry.
So, unless there are other questions, I'll move to a couple other takeaways. Is that okay, or should we?
Sure. Yeah.
We're good. So up to 13?
Yes. So again, I've mentioned this, but it really is important for us to put a point on this again, which is, obviously there's connections with respect to economic development. Obviously there is, takeaways with respect to mixed use and the importance of housing with that mixed use. But I think what sometimes becomes shadowed is the critical importance of making an aesthetically and an environmentally sound and a, frankly, green area of the common, and not just the common green itself. I think it's also in some respects a real estate issue. People are more prone to be interested in areas that they feel that they can, be outside, walk outside, have areas that they can bring their kids. It may sound sort of trivial, but it's not in a lot of the development analysis that we've done generally in other areas of the state. So we were pleased to hear that that folks were really interested in additional green spaces, because you can weave that into how the streetscape improvements are done. So next piece is talking a little bit about the zoning regulatory changes that we're heading towards. But I guess I know we're taking questions, but we can pause again if anybody has any other questions about those takeaways.
I do have one other question, Julie.
Sure.
Related to traffic, safety. Did you get any other sense? I didn't see from any of the comments. Did you get any sense as to what folks' thoughts were around that? Because I know that somebody brought that up to me around traffic and safety, and I mentioned that with the changes that are being proposed, that we actually believe that traffic calming will naturally occur based off the curb cuts and how parking will be designed and crosswalks and things like that. Is there anything more that we can say about that?
It's a great point. There is a lot to be said about that. I think that you're right, Anna, in saying that it is somewhat of a naturally occurring transformation, because with new developments, redevelopment sites, there's often the curb cuts and the stormwater management. Hopefully that if the town is pushing that in site plan review, for instance, that those things hopefully will come along. However, when it comes to ensuring that you have a broader scale of a plan, essentially it's almost an addendum, if you will, to the overall redevelopment plan that we are proposing. There is importance in making sure that all of these improvements are within a proper scheme for the throughways, for Great Road, for King Street, for any connecting streets, and any entries into properties or adjacent streets. Because for instance, we've talked with folks on Russell. I think it's Russell. Is it? I don't have it up here in front of me, but the street that the town has purchased a historic property on, and there's a neighborhood right behind there.
Robinson.
That's an instance where there has to be some continuity in how these streetscape improvements are done and traffic calming is done. So what we're going to be recommending is a series of actions that can be taken, that we've seen taken from other communities, in trying to work through either the process that you've already started with, for instance, with the MassWorks program, over, on Taylor Street and in the area down at Foster, I think, down towards the commuter station. That's the kind of work that needs to continue to be followed through for the common area. So it's a very important piece.
Yeah, could I just add, other than saying it's an important piece, I just want to reemphasize that, or just follow up with what Anna just mentioned, that is quite a number of, not a surprising number, but quite a number of residents have, shall we say, both those who are enthusiastic and not so enthusiastic about the plans for the common, always comment about the traffic, both from the safety and traffic volume point of view. And I want to make sure that in the roadmap that we address the traffic and pedestrian safety, getting back and forth earlier rather than later, or at least bring it in so that we can get started with MassDOT as early as possible in trying to achieve at least safety as the common, as it were, develops. In other words, safety should be developing alongside of, and not, as it were, as a consequence of development of the common. I'm just...
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've been thinking about it in those lines all along, and there are sort of phased improvements that can be done at both, first the town level, then working with MassDOT, and, planning to ensure that there is continuity with the developments that occur, sure. So, is there any other thoughts or questions on that, or do you want to move into where we're at with the zoning?
I think we're ready for the next step.
Okay. So, there's not a lot you can show. It's a lot of word and research and, looking into other examples. But, Marion, if you want to go to the next slide. We, from the very beginning, it's just part of what consultants do. Whenever anyone asks for any of your work, whether it's looking at one site and what the constraints of development are at one site, or an area like the Common, or an even larger area like a full town, you always need to look at the base of law first, just to basically understand what you're working with, what you're dealing with, and we did that. It's something we did very early because we needed to be sure that when we were looking at the scenarios and we were trying to basically come up with these schemes for redevelopment, what would have to change regulatory. We showed that all along on the the scenario slides and posters have given you a flavor of, okay, if we had this density of development, we'd need to change parking requirements and setback requirements, etc. However, we are now at a point to look deeper than what I would call those being, let's say, dimensional changes, lot-based changes, but we're talking about, a whole area where how do I say, but ensuring that the changes that are made, not only in the zoning, but in any regulation that relates to it, whether it's subdivisional, even though this doesn't directly apply, there still has to be a continuity across the set of regulations that relate to site plan review. So that's stormwater, wetlands, aquifer protection, everything. And so thinking that through, we just came up with, this is a very preliminary list. Again, it's very dry to see a lot of the language and words on a slide, but a couple of things that really pointed out to us is that, things like, for instance, you have changed your zoning with respect to mixed use, and there is indeed some mention of what is the town's interest and type of design. But it doesn't go far enough to, again, make sure that you situate a redeveloped building or a new building on a lot. And so those are the types of changes that need to be made. We've talked about an idea for FormBased Code, which is something that provides you with some specifications on example design, so different types of setbacks and what they would look like, for instance. But that's something that can also be accomplished within your traditional zoning by stating, maximum setbacks, minimum setbacks under certain conditions. So this list here is by absolutely no means everything that we've looked at, but it's just to give you a sort of flavor for, in general, there needs to be modifications on what property owners can do on their lot. There needs to be some real hard look into, housing in the over 55 type, and I understand that, there's been some changes made there. So that's something that we're going to need to look into and make sure that we understand what those amendments are. But to basically ensure that varying types of housing can occur within this mixed-use scheme, and also to look at these guidelines for design of different intersections. So that relates to sort of setting the table for those discussions that you'll need to have with respect to the different streetscape improvements, and then moving on to discussions with MassDOT. So there's some work to be done in terms of moving from recommended changes to approved changes at next Springtown meeting. That's our next sort of phase of work after the redevelopment plan is drafted. I don't know if you want, I think maybe we should pause here. The next series of slides is just to, I had talked to Mike briefly and, understood that we've already talked about form-based code, but I wasn't sure if that was something that we needed to cover. That's what the next couple slides are. So I'll pause here about our zoning analysis, and I guess take some questions if you have them.
Jonathan, do you have any questions?
Well, I think several of these things are kind of in the works. The older 65 older bylaw, the accessory apartments, at least two of them are seemingly either have been done recently or up for vote at the upcoming town meeting. Have you seen that material, and how does that fit in with what you think might be necessary?
So I think I caught most of what you were saying, that there's some amendments on the table, and I'm not sure if you're referring to the housing one. We are aware of that. If there's another, I'm not sure I know which one that is.
Yeah, we also have
we are
accessory
certainly trying to work, directly with Barron to make sure that we know if there's current changes being made that need to be incorporated.
Yeah. And you and I will talk as soon as we're ready to dig into this.
Okay.
Lyle, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No.
Anna?
Nope, no more comments, thank you.
Okay, so
I just,
Barron, should we move
yeah,
on?
I'm sorry,
or-
could I just ask one other
Question?
question? Just one. On your list, I was looking at revised impervious surface requirements of aquifer. Okay. The reason I'm interested in this one because of its connection with other infrastructure improvements, and I just wanted to know, among those that affect what I would call that one, along with, I hate to move backwards, along with green infrastructure, okay? So green infrastructure and, aquifer and water protection district. I was wondering whether or not the roadmap will include or make it clear that the presence of a sewer, to what extent is the presence of a sewering system in the common necessary to achieve the green, which, and aquifer and water protection.
Yeah, so Mike, it was something that we definitely need to discuss. I mean, there's a couple of different places within the roadmap. First is just pointing out what the existing conditions are, because I think that that's something that as planners, as folks who are going to be involved in redevelopment or development proposals, the basis of information is critical. So, there's an area that, the common area that we've studied is primarily outside of the aquifer district, but there are some areas that are within the zone of influence. So that's the area where, if you have a septic system, it infiltrates and it can be within a certain distance of an aquifer. The reason we put it in here is merely because, you do have commercial and residential area properties that are on septic, and it is a factor for that, is direct infiltration. So what we plan to do for the roadmap is, first lay that all out and have folks have an understanding of what the implication of that is. But again, as consultants, we're not proposing or pushing one scheme over the other. With the preferred redevelopment scheme, we will, of course, discuss how that is based on having a certain type of wastewater capacity, and it becomes really tricky to have infiltration units for a certain level of commercial, retail, restaurant, using a septic, and also being sure that you're not within the zone of influence. It's part of the analysis that we'll provide. And then, of course, I think it goes without saying, if you're not using a septic system and you're not infiltrating directly to the ground, that zone of influence issue goes away. But there is also, as I've mentioned before, the location of the system, and there is infiltration that needs to happen there. That's out of our scope, but it's of course something that is, something we'll have to mention just in terms of, when you're looking at, how the sewer system is designed and where that system gets discharged.
Right. I was just thinking sort of mixed use, but a small m and a small u, and that is that many residences in the common area, residential property owners may not instantly associate themselves or hook up with the sewer system. Commercial property owners are more likely to do so. And I just wanted to make sure that, not necessarily that your operation would necessarily deal with that, but make sure that the fact that we have that kind of mixed use in the first place should be brought to the attention of town planning. That's all. I'm making sure the roadmap has the warning signals built in, as it were.
Oh, definitely, yes. I mean, there's needed improvements in capacity that have to occur for this
Right.
Development scheme.
Okay. No further questions at this point.
Okay. All right. So much more to come on this. Again, a flavor of what we're looking at. And, Maren, you can point me in the right direction. I don't know if it's worth going through some of the components of FormBased Code. We've talked about that. I guess apologies, wasn't clear as to whether this was something that the committee wanted more prep on. If not, we can certainly move to our next steps, which is slide 22.
Okay, sure. Let's move to slide 22. I'd like to save the ammunition for form-based code when we're in a position to, as it were, implement.
Okay, so next steps, actually, really, I guess, Maren, slide 23. So this is just going back to the timeline, giving you a flavor. We've done a lot to prepare for the next bit of work. Just to give you an understanding, this is pretty common, no pardon the pun, in this type of work where a lot of preparation goes into conceptual design, understanding the redevelopment potential, all of the upfront work that we did, and that's gone away. So you can see that the timeline here is basically as where we are coming up to. And there's been a lot of work in pulling all of that material and information and public engagement feedback and your feedback and your great discussions and comments that we've received from you into what this roadmap is. And we've been working very diligently behind the scenes on that. We've talked to Mike, Anna, and Maren about having an internal draft completed here. We always, at practice, have our team and we have a set of internal reviewers and our staff to make sure that we're giving you the best product. Next week is when we can then turn that over for review, Maren and Anna and Mike, and then for the committee's review. The hope is that by the time November 7th rolls around, we'll have a pretty decent draft, with one caveat being, obviously, where we end up with discussing the zoning proposed changes that we will recommend will somewhat depend on what happens on, October 29th. But that is the bit of work that we're finishing up. And then I will say that there is a bit of a gap in time between having a finalized plan and moving into some specific language for zoning approval, and approval by various committees and the town meeting. You can see that the next time that we come together in terms of public engagement is more in late of January of next year, and then really ramping up for the presentation regulations that we provide between basically February and March next year. So I guess the next and last slide that I just wanted to talk about was just where the roadmap stands and what that kind of is starting to look like. But before that, if there's any questions on the schedule, let me know.
Well, I think the town meeting date is actually in April, isn't it?
No, it'll be May, but the warrant will close in March. So
Oh,
that's-
I
I
see.
think that's why we're being backed up to that date,
Okay.
if I remember the discussion.
And Anna, do you think that schedule shown here is consistent with the work pattern of the planning board, which is going to play a very significant role in basically handling any of the zoning changes?
Well, I see that the draft zoning recommendations would come sometime in November, and the board won't meet again until
December 6th.
December 6th. Yep.
Will that happen? I mean, if a form-based code recommendation is adopted at town meeting, will that affect the draft zoning regulations recommendations when they're delivered? Will that change?
It does. It does, because with developing form-based code, there are additional, engagement in terms of the design examples that we are proposing to include as visuals in the code. So there's I'd say a pretty decent amount of additional public engagement in the form of meetings with the committees and design charrette, which is within the proposal. So basically that sort of fills in that gap of time in the later part of this year, early part of next year.
Okay.
And of course, there's Plan B. If for any reason form-based code does not get funded on the 29th, we will have to, by expediency, have to move ahead with using what tools we have available. Yep.
Right. And so, this is a flexible schedule in the sense that, for instance, if we've completed the plan and, there's no reason to wait, we can certainly, push up having the zoning recommendations completed and, revisit the time that is needed to have the discussions with the board and with the public hearing, when that needs to happen before the spring town meeting.
Yeah, I think if everything goes affirmatively that we will want to just revisit dates and whatnot one more time.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Are there
does that
any,
make sense? With those caveats, then I guess, Mary, I was going to talk on slide 24 about this roadmap. It's very anticipated from our perspective, as I'm sure yours. We have a very robust outline of what the document is becoming, which I've shared with Maren and Mike, and we can certainly give you a clean copy of that. It's our hope is that this is a very dynamic product in which the planning board, certainly zoning board, your committee, all committees that are involved will very easily be able to refer to very specific items within the plan that relate to all of the pieces of work. So design, obviously scale of development, economic development, green infrastructure and open space recommendations, and the intent is also to include a matrix of sort of an action plan, a work plan that is, that really lists out all of the actions that we are recommending and who we think the responsible entity is to lead that and what potential time frame that could be done in, and some resources. That's typically what we do for this type of planning document. Then, again, I think the only unknown is just sort of what type of focus we will provide with respect to the recommendations on zoning changes that we would, ultimately create.
I looks like you've covered the waterfront. I think it would be very useful to make sure that you resend or send again the most updated version, understanding that these are drafts or these are working documents to the entire committee, make them available through Maren, so the committee members can at least know what the content is, at least in outline form, and some of the, shall we say, the beginning of the meat of the roadmap.
Okay.
And that way you can get some, coherent feedback, if it helps at all, which I think it might, because I'm sure we'll be hearing more about public attitudes towards some of this material on the 29th and after the 29th.
Okay, sure.
Can I raise one other question? I'm not sure whether this is the time to mention this, but it seems like we're talking about two kinds of things. One of them is a regulatory document, which is the zoning form-based code, however that turns out. And then certain other things like streetscape improvements and greening up things and stuff like that, which is not regulatory, but which is actually requires action by the town or possibly the town in conjunction with the state. Mike, I see, is shaking his head, so he's not sure about.
No, my impression, and then I'm asking Julie to dive in, my impression is that streetscape components and green are going to be part of the code. That's what form-based code actually addresses, among other things. In other words, if you're going to do something in the common as a developer or private property owner, you're going to have to adhere to certain regulations that are built into the code, which is expressed through form-based. That is my preliminary naive interpretation of it.
Okay, well, clear that up,
Yeah,
because maybe I'm wrong
I can
then.
step in there, Mike. I think, yes, you're right. It will be. If we do that form-based code type of work, it does include specific elements that relate to design and improvements that are on site, like stormwater management. But think of it this way: so the plan, the roadmap, is somewhat of a matrix or a hierarchy, right? So the umbrella of our recommendations is the roadmap. We will discuss all of the non-regulatory. you really can't put a hard line on that because there are some things that cross, but let's say activities that the committee, the planning board, all various entities, the Department of Public Works, we will recommend that they engage in, and following that, yes, is going to be a separate set of recommendations on changes to specific regulations that relate to this work. So if there's changes to, I don't even know, I haven't looked, if you need a stormwater management bylaw update, wetlands regulations, anything relating to the Aquifer Protection District, et cetera, will be the regulatory piece. It's going to be what I'm saying, visualizing as a appendix or an addendum to this plan, because that piece of work is very specific to what zoning changes, because as you know, zoning and the code and ordinances are directly related to whatever regulations you put in place. So it's going to be a piece of the larger umbrella. The matrix, I would also say that is a appendix, that is a piece of the larger umbrella of the plan. So there's these sort of tiered recommendations that we're going to be providing.
Okay, thank you.
Makes
That
sense?
was very helpful.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay.
Is there anything else from our committee members? Okay. Thank you, Julie.
Sure. Oh, no more questions. Wow, okay.
Cool.
Well, you've schooled us well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being able to go through this with you. Apologies that I couldn't be there in person, but I'd probably just bring more rain.
There you go. Thanks again.
We're anxious to get your feedback, and Mike, thank you for reminding. Mara and I will send a revised outline that's annotated, and that could be sent to the committee. We'd love to get some feedback on that, and we'll just keep proceeding with the work, the document.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So, Marin, did you? Do I hang up now?
Yep, we're all set. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks all. Have a great night.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Julie.
bye.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to move back to the agenda and just pick up for emphasis, because it may come back, I think, during later parts of the agenda, that the issues of traffic and public safety have come up in the open house and before, and have become part of the discussion about what should or shouldn't be done in the common. And it is part of the perception, the pre-existing perception in town about the fact that the traffic issue is very difficult, or shall we say, something that people want addressed, whether or not we do a sewer, whether or not the sky is blue or red. It is very important that safety and traffic be addressed in town, and that's a priority of the master plan. So I have no difficulty in taking it under our, shall we say, our promotion and guidance wings. Okay, I think I'd like to go to next steps, town meeting, that's item number B3, outcomes follow-up. Is there any objection to moving ahead that far from anyone?
Oh, it's
I
fine.
don't think we've covered the others.
Okay. What is meant by outcomes follow-up is the town meeting, there are 2 points there are many points that will affect us on the town meeting, at least 3 that come up right away, but the 2 of them I want to emphasize happens to be the amount of funding that we requested for form-based coding. And the second one, although we didn't ask for it, we're definitely giving it vigorous support, and that is the borrowing of $2.1 million to do a design for sewering for the common, Littleton Common District. So if both pass, pretty much what Julie has discussed and where we are, assuming resources are available, we can begin looking seriously at completing our tasks for the common. If, on the other hand, we are unable to get form-based code through, which I'm going to take that first, that means I'll try to return in the spring, the next opportunity, to try to secure it. Because, quite frankly, the pace of development of the common, assuming the sewering bond goes through, will be not moving at it doesn't mean that things will be moving faster. They won't, or we can still implement code changes while that's going on. The second scenario is if both of those two elements do not make it through this town meeting. And my simple proposal would be that regardless of either one of those two, we should proceed with the zoning using the Euclidean method and start addressing the concerns about the big holes that exist in the common in regard to zoning. And number two, at the very least, take up the issue of making the common area, whether it's sewered or not, raining or not, snowing or not, safer. I'd be happy to hear brief protest, discussion, premature, no interest, whatever, because I'd like to get some guidance from our board so that we can, as a group, because it means taking on assignments for individuals here, depending on the outcome on the 29th.
I think that makes sense.
These are not, you're not committing, I just want to make sure that this is approval of some drastic, I just don't want you to be surprised if you're asked down the road fairly quickly, sooner, maybe at our next meeting, to take on a task you haven't seen before. Have any comments?
Yep, just wait and see what happens on the 29th.
Yep.
Okay. That it doesn't require a vote, so even though I know we have a quorum, I would prefer to have everyone here to do it, so we make sure that the other members are alerted to it. And also the feeling of the board members that we're here, that we're prepared and we know what's coming. Okay, the third item on there is engagement with property owners. I have
Can
informally
you say
started.
more about two
Sure.
before you get to three?
Sure. Yeah, number
The
two.
Traffic and public safety?
Yeah.
Are you thinking of, well, first of all, are you thinking of public safety as part of the traffic thing, or is that something separate or more kind of?
Public safety means crosswalks.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
How traffic is handled.
Okay.
What are, and engaging frankly with MassDOT, figure out a way to do that effectively.
Would that new committee that was set up that Gary was so keen on, would that be the place for a lot of this stuff to happen?
My understanding is that's a place where many things are supposed to be coordinated. They've just got started. I don't know where yet they really are. They've had a meeting.
Yeah.
But I don't know what of substance they're grappling with. This is of something of substance. That is, this is very real. These are ongoing safety issues.
Yeah,
So-
I would suggest it wouldn't move forward without the traffic committee.
Yeah, agreed, but I mean, we just have to look, I think we have to do our part of promotion and guiding.
Okay, but I mean, it seems like there's some things like the common area, which is only us. I mean, we work with other people, but I mean, it's really incumbent on us to do the common. With the traffic and public safety thing, it seems to me that we might push other people, but it's more some other people's roles to do that. I don't know what you...
At the moment, I'm for promotion and guidance, pushing,
okay.
and let's see what happens.
Okay.
Can't go beyond that. That help?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, engagement with property owners. I just want to informally, I've had some discussions with certain property owners in the, commercial property owners in town, and also ones that plan to be property owners in the common. And I just want to, depending again on the outcome of the meeting on the 29th, I just want to let the folks know or be prepared for the fact that our discussions with them may intensify, involving us, because we're sort of in charge of what happens in the, not in charge of, but offering opportunities to develop in the common. We'll be engaging with them directly, more directly than before. more, Joey said clearly, and work with other committees such as the Selectmen and hopefully Planning Board and others. So I just want, again, specific assignments may come up in order to facilitate that.
I thought it was very useful that the, what is it, Bank North, or whatever they call it, Northern Bank, people were there at the,
Yes.
at the meeting.
Yeah.
That was a good thing. You
Yeah.
invited them, I guess.
Yeah, the chair invited them, but they were aware ahead of time. The chair invited, there are others there as well, but again, we have to wait for the 29th to see whether or not we have anything to discuss.
Right. Right.
And the other folks who were also there, but apparently in some, not in disguise, but less obvious, were people from the Commonwealth who wanted to know how serious we were. And I would have to say, I'm hoping that on the 29th, they find out just how serious we are, because if we're not, I think that the town could find itself on the bottom of every list of support that generally would come to us anyway. So I'm hoping we move ahead with our vision, however slowly we do. Okay. So down to more, shall we say, pedestrian matters. Are there any other questions about where we're heading and the options open to us?
Can I ask a question about the town meeting? Sorry,
Please.
I was just trying to see if I could figure it out myself, but the 42,000 that you're hoping to get for the form-based coding, it says that, it just says for costs associated, including consulting services.
Right.
Who do you hope to get as a consultant?
They have to be qualified.
Right, because looking at the website for the form-based coding,
Yeah.
it looked like it was a lot more than 42,000 for anything of a lot of substance. Or
It's,
is that just a starting
th-
point?
I believe that we can accomplish a lot of what we want to accomplish with form-based code. Remember, we have planners, we have professionals.
Well, that's what I wondered. So
Yeah.
they would be working with those consultants?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, Maren and the planning board would be working with them on this. This is not going to
No,
be.
just, I mean, they had specific prices on the website of the form-based coding website.
Okay, when you deal, we're going to be dealing with a consultant who has their own pricing mechanisms.
Okay.
And we have to, I think the rules are that we have to select someone who is qualified.
All right.
Okay. And by the way, the form-based code is being used, I think, at least in 2 locations in air.
They're working on proposing form-based code in 2 different places.
Right. So and also
There
the
are-
state is very interested in having towns and cities use it. So there's.
So there are other consultants out there besides the
What-
form-based code people?
Oh,
that
exactly.
can-
Oh, yeah, yes. Oh, yeah. And number 2, the main thing I'm trying to do here is set a base so that when I'll be looking for additional funding, just in case, from the state. And it's very good have the town to already have invested in this.
Are you referring to the Form-Based Code Institute website?
I think so. That's,
That one?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I couldn't quite tell how,
Yeah.
if that was, very insular, or if there were other people who
Oh,
had it. or-
there are people who do form-based code who have the Institute is a separate, it's, yeah.
Yeah, they do some of the, I think they do projects themselves,
Selves,
but,
yeah.
yeah, they're also preeminent.
Okay, is this a good time, Maren, to go over the resources, or?
Actually, it is.
Okay.
So just now.
I'd just like to check in with the committee. I asked Maren to put together, I mean, we haven't,
I'm going to step on that for a moment. I
Please.
did get, like, just now, from Jamie, a spreadsheet of the expenses to date. And if I can get it to show. Okay, let's try that again. We'll cross our fingers. Nope,
okay.
showing my background.
Use that screen. Let's try Windows P.
Perhaps take this and just like click the top of it. Okay, and drag something. There you go.
So this is the fun, thank you. So this is the, what's been spent so far, in breaking down the
Is
last
this-
two bills.
Is this what, is this you reporting? Or this is Jamie's reporting?
This is Jamie's report.
Jamie's report, okay.
Right, and what I couldn't do from the bills was understand exactly which items they were pointing to, and so this one pulls all of those together.
So now, this now can be matched against the statement of work and bills or invoices received as well as invoices already paid.
Right.
Okay.
So,
So according to Jamie's analysis, which we're going to have a separate session after you've had a chance to take a look and make sure. So this is where Jamie is.
right.
Okay.
So if I could move it over,
I have to say, I can't see it.
Well, once you, here, I'll move forward. There's one right behind you.
Oh.
I'm not trying to
Well,
make
now
you.
I can't see that at all.
Okay. All right, so this is why it's important to have these things on our hands before the meeting. Do your best. What does Jamie think he has left over in his pot?
so look at it up there too.
Okay, if
So
you don't
that'd be
know,
the
it's okay.
27?
Huh? Sorry?
That'd be the 27, all right.
So in other words, he thinks he has left roughly $27,000, is that correct? Or do I have it wrong?
That's how I'm reading it.
Sorry?
That's how I'm reading it.
Okay.
But I'll certainly go back and check.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I tell you what, why don't we not try to take this on tonight? Because the only one that I want to make sure of is that you have, Maren has some idea of approximately where we are. And
Exactly.
let's Jamie's stuff be your homework. Okay, and Ann and I will get together with you by some means and hash it out and see if he gets an A or a C for his homework.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, he's already lost points for not doing it in the first place. Okay, so anyway, so as far as you're concerned, roughly estimate, where do you think we are?
Well, what I didn't know is what the bill would be for the September work, and he's added that information
Okay.
here.
And-
And that's the 27th. I've got to dig into this.
You got to dig into it, okay.
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
why don't we stop right here and say, do your homework, we'll be back together on this. Okay. Okay, so that closes out item C. Thanks very much, because I want this to be done carefully, so we know where we're going and how we're doing it, and make sure that the town is getting its dollar's worth. So we can't move on this until the analysis is done. Okay, I'd like to turn now to public input.
No, nothing more than,
The floor is yours.
no, they asked me a question. What's that?
Okay. All right. Now, I did skip something, and I'd like to come back to it for the members, and that is, some of you, I think, I hope all of you took notes when you took notes shortly after you attended the meeting, the open house, and that allowed you to have some idea of what people said to you, what your impression was of the public's response to the open house. So you don't have to, as it were, give a long soliloquy, it's just a summary of your notes. Lyle?
Most interesting conversation, certainly. Thank you for inviting Northern Bank and Anna for inviting me over. So Brent Mogul, architect working with them, had his views and hopes and dreams to share, and I don't know how much we get to promo and guide, but if they have a real live project that's going to be happening in the very near and foreseeable future, I would think we would want to get form-based code in front of them as fast as we possibly can.
That's an interesting point. Did you get any sense from the architect guru, what he thought of what was put in front of him?
He had particulars about.
Who is this? Can you make?
Brent Mogul is the architect that's working with Northern Bank.
Okay.
And he's up in Harvard. So his thoughts that night were particularly about the on-street parking and trying to figure out how that'd all work. And rather than getting down into the weeds, I think it was just more important to discuss that if we can bring the form-based vision to them, since they are talking about joining several properties together, we might be able to enact this soon and let people know what we're talking about.
Okay, that's an important piece.
Yeah.
And did he mention, not that he had to, but I just want to find out, did he also connect, pardon the pun, with the sewer?
Good question.
If he didn't, he did this.
Our conversation did not go there, to be perfectly honest, so, no. I mean, I'd be happy to talk to him further.
Well, we wait and see that we have some substance to talk about. Any other comments that you recorded so beautifully?
Let's see if we can do this without being indecorous. One townsperson certainly needed to have his conversation directed to the smart sewer meeting and not ours. And I will trust that that townsperson will find his way to the smart sewer meeting so that he can bring his agenda, which was copious, to that meeting. His outspokenness was something needing to be reeled in, and if that was your intent or not, it seemed to have happened, so that was good.
Okay, and I just want to check, because the smart sewer people had planted a person in front in the lobby trying to ask questions, which I don't think worked out very well, but I'm not sure. Okay,
Those were the standouts.
great. Anna?
So I did not have a chance to talk to too many folks. I had a chance to try to answer some questions for a few very passionate individuals. And so some of the questions that I heard from the overall gathering of Q&A that was being answered by Julie, I think were some of the ones that we've already talked about today. So, for example, talking a little bit about traffic, somebody talking about how to actually make this happen, given that this is private development. And then another comment that was made around the fact that this individual really likes West Acton and that that's what we need in Littleton. And somebody else brought up the idea for recreation space.
Yeah.
So I thought that was relevant to the green space and what we were talking about earlier. And then somebody else brought up the whole idea of empty retail and how to draw people. And I actually wanted to openly address that particular topic, because one of the things about the revitalization of the common is that that is the intention of actually being able to create an environment that will draw people, as opposed to a development that might be off on the side of a road somewhere with nothing else around it.
Right.
And no real access points to it other than a vehicle. So I think that's part of what makes this whole idea different.
Absolutely.
And for people who recognize that there are other communities that are close in to us, whether it's Ayers' little 2-block downtown area, or whether it's West Acton or Concord, those are areas that people seem to identify with. So being able to have something like that.
I don't do, this is sort of in response, I have some thoughts, but this is in response to what Anna was saying. I mean, I rarely do this actually, but I just happened to drive through West Acton just the other day, and it was really looking rather good, you know. I thought, gee, this looks a lot better than I remember it. And I think that would be a good kind of thing to model, because, you know, to show people what we might like, because, you know, comparing it to some of these other places, I mean, Air is much more sort of built up and has brick buildings and several stories, and Concord is Concord, and that's another issue, but, that's not so different from us, and it might be. Okay, I did actually write a few things down. I only got them to Maren this afternoon, so I think she sent them to everybody, so if you want to have a look at them, you did or you didn't? I
Did not.
Didn't? Oh, anyway, so I had a few thoughts. One of them was attendance. I thought attendance wasn't bad, but I think it could have been better. I mean, I think, maybe just because it's a smaller room, but with the previous meeting we had at the fire station, it seemed like there were a lot of people there. This meeting, you sort of had the sense that there weren't that many. Even a lot of the boards that you should have figured, should have been there. Maybe they had one member, or maybe they didn't have any members. I have to apologize because the Historical Commission was certainly one of those. We had a meeting the previous night, and I said everybody should come, and nobody came except me.
And Carolyn.
Carol.
Well, I don't belong to them.
Well,
Carolyn is not actually.
But she's still a star, and I think that,
A groupie.
no.
Anyway, so that was the thought there. I don't know if there's a way to attract women. I don't even know how you get people to come to these things and so on, but it would be nice maybe if we could get a little more attendance, but obviously I don't know how to do that. Then I had something I call general framing. I thought, but maybe I'm wrong about this, because it seemed like some of the comments indicated that people did have a sense of where we were and where we're going. I thought maybe it could have been focused a little bit more, starting with that board that we've seen innumerable times of the area of interest, and then going on to where we are now. I think what I thought we wanted to get was people's response to the where we've come at this point, and maybe we should have emphasized that a little bit more. That was something that I thought. And then the second thing was to in that regard was that I think we need to make it clear that although there might be some things happening very immediately, like this Northern Bank development, which could really, make a big thing in a short time, then a lot of the other things are going to take, it's not something that's going to happen, tomorrow or even in a few years. It's going to be a long process, and I think maybe we should make that, maybe that needs to be made clear.
I agree, Jonathan. I think one of the factors about this is the master plan, which is why we're doing all of this, is going out to 2030. So that, when created, was a 13-year plan, so over time.
Yeah. Then with the question and answer session, I thought Julie was very good in answering the questions that were related to the sort of things that she really does. The other things like the sewering or the transportation, say, which really aren't part of what they're working on, and which, there are various developments that have gone on, that she could have been better at that, or maybe should have just said, well, that's another topic and is not for the meeting here, or something. I mean, maybe you and Chase, Mike and Chase could have been there to answer those kind of questions, which, Julie wasn't really so prepared to answer. I mean, somebody asked about transportation, and, she didn't seem to realize that there is already this bus service that's running now. Not too many people maybe know about it, but, that's something that needs to be brought out and is sort of part of the plan for the town as a whole. Or the sewer thing, I think really, you need somebody like Chase or one of the members of that committee to talk about. She wasn't really prepared to do that, and I think I don't know if the rest of you felt that way, but I thought her response to that, to the questions around the sewer was, could have been better, let's say. I mean, I think, could have been better. And then finally, you always have to expect in these things that people are going to have their own little horn to toot or be unhappy about things. You always get that. You try and sort of deal with them as best you can, and I think we did, and just accept that that's that's part of these kind of meetings, that people use it to sort of blow off steam and to complain about this. Somebody was telling Chase, I think it was, well, my friend said we could build a sewer for $5 million. How come you're asking for $27 million? Who knew, who friend? I mean, I just overheard this conversation. I don't even know who was saying it, but she was talking to Chase. And then somebody else, I think that guy who said a lot of things that, wanted to really shoot his mouth off, said, well, we should sewer Long Lake first. Well, I mean, I suppose you could argue that, but that's not really part of what we're talking about here. But somebody's going to say, that sort of thing. And I don't know, I guess we just have to sort of accept that and kind of go on. These were some thoughts that I had and sort of think about for the next time. We probably have one or two more of these sorts of things, and maybe some things we might think about for those future discussions.
Aaron, have we gotten some more information post-meeting? Did we get lots, small amounts, or?
We got small amount of additional feedback. One thing that's stepping on being able to get more feedback is having staff time to cross-post the items on Facebook and Twitter. With so much going on right before town meeting, we're running into stepping on, what's going on with the sewer study and this. So while it's important information to have now, it being so busy, we weren't able to get it out there as much. The forums will be open until the end of the month. We'll see if we can't promote a little more.
Yeah, and as far as the sewers goes, I think everyone here knows, that there's a forum tomorrow night at I think it's the high school, on the information forum for the sewers, so hopefully they'll get a good turnout and have questions and issues discussed and resolved, because the population, as far as I can make out, still is not engaged quite yet with a widespread understanding, other than anecdotal and misconceptions about what is actually feasible. I think the part that makes this difficult is very often folks in town forget that the spaces that we're talking about, the common, especially, that's private property. And the owners can do pretty much what they want within the, shall we, scope of our regulation. So we have to use other means, including regulation, to shape it. And if we don't have the tools, which, by the way, include sewering and zoning together, the thing could be out of control in no time at all.
I think we should also think about with the sewer, I don't know, so here I am talking like I'm an old resident here, when all I've been here is 25 years, but some of you are much more recent than that. And I mean, Lila's been here 300 years, but...
And his horse is waiting for him outside, so continue on, yes.
But, there's been a strong opposition on the part of, like, everybody that I know to sewering. And whenever I talk to them, they get all sort of, and I sort of, I hesitate to even say this to, all these people who I think are my friends, and on every other issue, we probably vote for the same candidates and we vote for the same things and so on. But on this one, it's just hard to get to these people. And I think, they have this idea that the way to prevent development, which they don't want, is not to have a sewer. And I think all of that is wrong. And, but it's hard because a lot of people think that, and that's something that I don't know how to quite overcome. And this has been a long-term thing. Whenever people have mentioned a sewer in Littleton, despite the fact that every town around us has sewers, that people think, somehow this is going to create, I don't know what. One of my friends said, one person I know said, I don't want to be a Wellesley. They're worse fates than winding up like Wellesley. But anyway.
Well, yes, it's called public opinion, and I'm hoping that folks realize that it's much, much more expensive and puts us at great liability if we have a moat going all the way around Littleton to prevent people coming to live here. I mean, that could be a very expensive undertaking, so I'm joking, obviously, but, you know, you have our sympathy.
Can I just, one thing?
Sure.
A couple people asked me about, like, the common proper, because we call this the common revitalization. They said, but we keep going down Great Road, and they're wondering what's gonna happen at the common. So I don't know if.
You mean the green piece?
Well, yeah, the, you know,
Triangular
the.
green
Yeah.
The green space and King Street and all in the mill. Because
Yeah.
we kind of focus on this section down here, which really isn't what we think of as the common.
Yeah.
So that was just a comment that I heard
Yeah.
more than one person ask about.
I think the idea here is that the area of interest was chosen because it is the most likely to, facilitate changing. The other properties, for a variety of reasons, are going to take a long time, but the same principle will probably follow that. No, Form-based code or whatever kind of zoning will affect those properties. So in other words, won't stop just a little circuit. It'll be over the village common area, which I think is already defined by existing regulation. So, I mean, they're going to be included. It's just that the rule to spend extra time and money making sketches that, shall we say, have a small opportunity in the near term, that's in the next 10 years of happening. That's, I could be
And I know
wrong.
you mentioned that, I'm just thinking,
Sure.
because people who haven't paid as much attention,
Right.
they think of the common, and they're thinking, what are you gonna do to Stephen Street, we were talking about,
Oh, no, they're
closing it off
on.
and making a cafe out of it or something.
Yeah,
so what happens to
there's a
that
couple of
idea?
there's a property owner on Stephen Street who wants very much, for example, to be hooked to the sewer, wants to do a redesign, the whole thing. It's just that it's very hard to just isolate that and then ignore the facts. I mean, the mill and the Conant building both have certain issues about their position and where they are that basically make them up. It's a hard, very, very expensive undertaking to revitalize that for anybody. It's after all private property, so it's, we have to calculate that in. Yeah.
So would it be wise each time we have a public forum to begin with the overview? Yes, because we're going to have a chance to bring
Sure.
on new people to help them understand that while we're calling it this,
Yeah.
its impact is
Yeah.
this, and it will play out throughout the town, but this is the
Yeah.
area of study to indicate what might happen.
Good idea. We might have a chance on the 29th.
Yeah, and as long as I'm speaking, I'll pick up on the very good points that Jonathan was making. So we didn't have a moderator person. So Julie was chief cook and bottle washer up front there,
Uh-huh.
receiving all of the arrows thrown at her and vaulting them back. So thinking that through, it might be wise to have someone to receive questions, direct questions, and say that's not germane to what we're talking about here tonight, but that could go to this next meeting. So that might help, because Julie wasn't there to do that, so.
Yeah, I think, I'm not going to criticize her. I think she wanted to basically command the Q&A.
Okay.
I really, I mean, I think, given all the work that her group has done, I mean, it would have been very helpful had she deflected certain questions, saying that's outside my scope and moved along, because she had enough to talk about just with her stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
anyway, it's just, I think Julie has gotten very excited about the project, and
No, I mean, she answered from her passion, saying,
Yes,
this
that's-
does matter to me.
that's
I'm
clearly-
actually a conservationist, but
Yeah.
this is what we're hired here to do, so.
thank you and thank you, Lyle, and thank you, Jonathan, for your insight, especially about your friends, but we'll let that. And a thank you for bringing it together. So I guess we can move on to the minutes. Are there any corrections or questions about the minutes?
I have a quick question, just on the one for the 28th of August. Second paragraph, third sentence starts with, "He himself feels," and I just wanted to confirm. Is that Rod or Mike?
Where is this?
Second paragraph on the August 28th meeting minutes, third sentence. It starts with, "He himself feels."
And what did he himself feel?
about apartments, but because the previous sentence has Rod in it and then Mike Fontanella in it, I didn't know whether it was Rod saying it or Mike Fontanella saying it.
If I recall, it was.
Well, I think that's clear that it's Fontanella.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Fontanella is the most recent
Yeah.
antecedent.
He would,
But I can make that clarification.
yeah. Yeah, it was, not because he's unusual, because I've heard him speak to that
Okay.
before.
So that was my only question.
Yeah, putting Mike and Mike in there might not be a great idea.
And then the latest ones that are ready are from the public forum on the 11th. Is that the right thing? Yep.
You all set?
Yep, we're good.
Well, I want to give Lyle a chance.
And that's what happened. I agree.
Okay.
The thing I was not quite sure on was the list of attendees from the committee.
Jonathan, do you have any comments you'd like to make on either one of them?
I don't remember
No.
seeing Mike Fontanella there. Was he there?
No, he was not there.
Okay.
I'll make that correction.
He was busy that night.
That's right, that was school committee night.
Well, with the one correction made, and I hear no further corrections, do I hear a motion to accept both sets of minutes as written?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Right.
The minutes stand as accepted with the correction. All right, upcoming meetings, please show up on the 29th. I will try to find out, we can all sit together, but knowing that you have families and other things, I'll just look around, and if I'm prepared with a slide to answer questions about form-based code. But I think most of the questions, if we get any, will be about misconceptions, which I'll try to gently put to rest. Mainly that this is a tool to accelerate intense development, as opposed to it doesn't matter what we decide it's going to be used for. So just want to let you know that we're ready to do that. Okay, the next one is November the 13th. Is that my understanding? And place and time?
Yes.
Place?
Mm-hmm.
And the real purpose of that meeting is to review the roadmap? Or
Yes, we're supposed to get at least a consensus on our side, at least, on where the roadmap is. Hopefully, we'll get a preview of it before the 13th, so you'll have a chance to review.
Well, I'd like to say this, if we don't get it by that Friday beforehand, then I suggest we cancel the meeting and postpone it to another date. So personally, I have that meeting and then possibly a planning board meeting in that same week, and that's just a lot. So having Fort Point send us stuff at the 11th hour without our ability to review it carefully is just not okay. And so if we can't have the weekend and Monday to prepare for that Tuesday night meeting, then I don't think we should do it.
All right, there's a,
I have no problem with that.
well, I have a problem. The problem is that the next week is the week of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's very early this year, and I won't be here. Though I admit that week is also difficult because Monday is Veterans Day, is a holiday, is Veterans Day celebrated, you know, 'cause it falls on the 11th, it's Sunday. So I don't know I really don't know what the best, I mean, you can meet without me the following week, not necessary, but.
Well, the following week is pretty hard for
Yeah.
everybody.
I believe from Julie's remarks tonight that we should have something, and I think that we just communicate with her that it has to be in our hands by the morning of, no later than the morning of the previous Friday.
Which is a night.
And I guess,
Okay, and if she can't get it to us then that topic won't be covered, and unless we're recovering from the events of the 29th, which is my main concern, I would like to hold that meeting date open for us to attend, depending on the outcome of the 29th.
And we do have the police station community meeting room set aside at 7 o'clock on the 13th.
Okay, but not the fire.
I'm sorry, the fire station.
Oh, good.
I said the wrong one.
Even more incentive now for you to come.
Oh, I'll come on the 13th.
See how easy that was?
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
It's the 20th, I won't be here, so.
You can crawl over, Jonathan.
All right. All right, and finally, I have to point out to Mpic meetings that one of the main rules of this committee is that whatever personal or business engagements that you have, that you think have priority over what we're doing, it's okay. I understand. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you folks we're few in number and we require a great deal to do, so I'm with you.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Do I hear a motion before we have a revolution to adjourn?
So moved.
Any objection, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We adjourn. Thank you very much.